Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and coming up in today's newscast, business is nearly back to normal as Israel eases more coronavirus restrictions. The Education Ministry fights to reopen schools in as little as a week. And you're going to want to stay tuned because an amazing Israeli invention can turn your tap water into a disinfectant. Well, coronavirus cases are continuing to rise in Israel, but restrictions are slowly being rolled back. 200 Israelis and counting have now died of COVID-19, and over 15,395 Israelis have been diagnosed with the virus as of Saturday night. That's an increase of more than 250 cases over the last 24 hours, with 132 in serious condition and about 100 people on ventilators. Well, in a bid to help stimulate the economy, as of Saturday night, all stores in the public sphere will be permitted to open, except for in shopping malls, which will remain closed.
It was really exciting. When we got in the car, we were like, oh my God, we're driving away. We're from Jerusalem, so it was an hour drive. We felt really excited and free, but we're not here for like a trip or just to get out. We're here because we have to get our stuff.
Well, she's not the only one who is excited. Hair salons, beauty parlors, and cosmeticians will also be allowed to open up, and restaurants will now be able to serve takeaway along with deliveries. All of these businesses will have to maintain strict rules of hygiene, including making sure that no more than 2 to 4 customers will be at any cash register, depending on the physical size of the shop. Store owners will have to take the temperature of all those who enter their businesses and put up partitions at cash registers as well. And a distance of at least 2 meters or 6.5 feet will also have to be maintained by all of those who are inside a given shop. Now, despite the reopening of business, police enforcement is going to step up to make sure that everyone adheres to the rules. Businesses that violate any regulations of cleanliness and hygiene could face a 2,000 shekel fine, and Israelis aged 7 and up are also now required to wear masks in public or face a fine of 200 shekels, even if they're first-time offenders. So how is the Israeli government deciding when it's right to roll back these restrictions? Well, the health ministry has just set new parameters on how to decide whether or not to ease or tighten restrictions amidst the coronavirus crisis. And ILTV's Aaron Porras has the details.
Despite regulations being rolled back as of last night, the government says that restrictions will be increased if Israel begins to see over 300 new sick people per day, over 300 seriously ill patients, or the doubling of the national number of sick every 10 days or less. Right now, only around 200 to 300 Israelis have been diagnosed with COVID-19 in recent days. Only 130 are in serious condition, and cases are doubling around every 20 days, which is a good sign. Up north, police are beginning to take down checkpoints at the entrances of Arab towns like Deir al-Assad and Be'ina, which have been on lockdown for the last 7 days due to their own outbreaks. As of Friday, Deir al-Assad had the highest infection rate of any community in Israel, despite only having 5,000 residents. While these 2 towns are no longer restricted zones, they will continue to be subject to nighttime curfews throughout the whole holy month of Ramadan. But as of 6 a.m. this morning, several mainly ultra-Orthodox towns in Beit Shemesh and Netivot have gone into lockdown again because of the spike in coronavirus infections in these areas in recent days.
Well, the Israeli government has just approved an 8 billion shekel plan to increase support for the self-employed and small business owners who have been hit hardest by the coronavirus. And this also comes as restrictions are eased and street shops open up again in a bid to help the economy. But how well will the Israeli government's exit strategy actually work? Joining us to discuss is Omer Moav, a professor of economics at the University of Warwick and the IDC Herzliya. So originally, Netanyahu announced that restrictions would be reviewed in 2-week intervals, but this latest decision to ease restrictions on the economy came just 5 days after the first. Was it too hasty in your opinion?
No, I think that we are actually, in a comparison to other countries with similar situation in terms of the spread of the disease. And I actually just read a fascinating report from the Aharon Institute at the IDC, Herzliya, which compares Israel's situation to many other European countries. it seems that we are behind in actually opening the economy back to activity, given the low spread of the disease at that point. We're very far from the point in which there is a concern about the ability of the health system to take care of the situation.
So let's talk about that 8 billion shekel aid plan. Under partial lockdown, independent workers would lose roughly 100 million shekels per day, and the economy as a whole would lose 500 million per day. Now, is this enough, this package that we're seeing, especially if there is going to be a second wave of infections?
Well, I think that the right thing to do, and I'm careful here because some things are in the consensus among economists, others are more debatable. The large consensus is that the government should help people to survive at that stage. So if someone doesn't have any source of income, the government should pay some unemployment benefits, etc. Going to save businesses is very popular at the moment in the public, and there's, of course, a lot of pressure to do it. But that's a debatable issue because we need to remember that the government is borrowing a lot of money, and this is a debt that we will need to pay in the future. And heavy debt also makes it harder to actually escape the recession that we are clearly in and might be a long recession. So I think that economists would say that the government should be very careful in its spending at that point of time because the money would be needed later on if there is a deep recession and people would need more help over time. So it's not clear what exactly is going on, what's the right thing. There are a few things that are all clearly mistakes. When Netanyahu announced this price of, this gift of 500 shekel for each child in the country, this is clearly a mistake. It sends the wrong message to the public, as if the government has endless resources and it could just pour money. And this comes with a huge cost.
So I wanted to ask you how you think Israel's financial direction is going to change under Israel Katz, who's likely to become the next treasury minister.
Well, it's very hard to say. Katz, in some cases, as Minister of Transportation, behaved in a way that was responsible and was able to fight strong interests. In other places, he was a complete populist. So it's very hard to say. I hope very much he would be a responsible Minister of Finance that understands that debt is a cost to the population. But it's very hard to change the course of the message from Netanyahu and the exiting Minister of Finance, Kachlon, who both behaved in a very unresponsible way. And brought Israel into this recession with a very high deficit.
All right, well,
start in a bad way.
Thank you so much for joining us with this update. I think that everybody has their eye on what's going to play out, especially with the Israeli economy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Now, with the health of the economy in mind, Israel's government is greatly easing restrictions on doing business, but not all companies are as eager to get back to work. As thousands of businesses across the country opened their doors today, hundreds of large Israeli companies are remaining closed, including Castro, Cafe, and more. They've signed onto a general strike in protest against the government, and their demands include financial compensation for the time they've been forced to close, similar to those received by small businesses. The companies, 200 of which have already declared their closures, also argue that their proposal for compensation is fair and minimalist. The head of the National Labor Federation, however, is blasting the large chains, accusing them of using their employees as hostages in their fight with the government, especially as most of these workers are now struggling to survive on unpaid leave alone. A full list of the striking companies has been made available, and it includes clothing chains, fashion design chains, home goods stores, sporting goods stores, opticians, and chain restaurants and cafes. When are we finally going to see a coronavirus vaccine? And will an Israeli scientist be the first to develop it? Well, Israeli scientist Professor Jonathan Gershoni has just been awarded a U.S. patent for his coronavirus vaccine design. And joining us now to explain how it works, what it is Jonathan Gershoni himself, professor of immunology and virology at Tel Aviv University. So how exactly does your patent for a vaccine design work?
There are many people who are working on vaccines today. Ours is unique in the fact that we are focusing on the weak spot of the virus. In order for viruses to infect, they have to bind a receptor on the cells that they are going to enter and invade. And so the virus has on its spike a receptor binding site, which is critical. And we've been able to reconstitute the site and isolate it and use that as a proposed vaccine design.
Interesting. And I understand that you actually started working on this several years ago. Can you explain how?
Well, we've been working on the interaction between viruses and their receptors for over 30 some years. And 15 years ago, we started working on SARS coronavirus when the epidemic in 2002, 2003 was, of course, great concern. And then is when we decided to focus on the receptor binding domain. However, it's a complicated problem, and one has to work out means and methods in order to reconstitute a functional receptor binding motif, as we refer to it. And when we finally finished our research and had the motif in hand, nobody was quite interested in SARS anymore. So we had to wait until MERS. And then in 2012, as you well know, the MERS epidemic emerged. And we've been working on MERS now for quite a few years. So by the time COVID-19 virus emerged, we had everything more or less geared up and ready to implement immediately. And that's what we've been doing since January.
Interesting. Now, there are several reports of vaccines that are making it to human trials around the world, including at least one Israeli vaccine, which will apparently enter human trials by the summer. How long do you believe is needed to develop an effective vaccine?
Well, again, the actual, many of the vaccines are using the viral spike protein in its whole structure as the ingredient in the vaccine that will be elicit a protective immune response. All of these vaccines, including ours, require, first of all, developing a vaccine modality, the thing that you're going to actually inject into a person, and that can take some time. Hopefully, we'll be finished our design within the coming months. However, once you have such a vaccine candidate, then they all have to go through phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 clinical trials, and that could take a year. So I don't expect that within the coming year, that is to say next Passover, we'll have a vaccine, but hopefully shortly thereafter.
Now, the Israeli Mossad has predicted that, the coronavirus crisis could last until the end of 2021. And as of today, the Israeli government is easing its strict quarantine measures. Do you agree with this step at this time? Are we ready to do this?
Well, it's very interesting. I think that globally and also here in Israel, we've all undergone some very dramatic social behavior changes. I think people realize that social distancing is something we can cope with. And the idea of wearing masks, surgical masks, is not foreign to us anymore. It was once probably viewed as a bit peculiar, but now people seem to take it in their stride. And so easing the quarantine now a bit is certainly reasonable, and monitoring to see how that's affecting the rate of infection is something very reasonable, because of course we have to get our economy up and going again.
Now, here's just a quick question. Is this a myth? Is a virus going to weaken in the heat in the summer?
It's a question everybody's asking. There is no real reason to assume that it's going to disappear. Now, will the rate of infection drop to some degree? Possibly. Will it then gain more impetus and an ability to infect during fall and winter? Most probably. When I was a kid, we used to think about polio, and polio season was necessarily in the summer. So I don't think that there are any quick rules for viruses that in the summer they take a vacation.
All right. Well, thank you so much for this information. I'm sure many of our viewers are very excited to have an answer to that question. When are Israeli children going back to school? That's a question that parents have been asking pretty much nonstop over the course of the past couple of weeks as they go crazy at home. Well, the shutdown of the education system has cost the Israeli economy over $730 million. That's because many households have had to keep at least one parent home tending to the kids instead of working, which is why the Israeli Education Ministry is now weighing a proposal to reopen schools. It's reported that preschools and kindergartens will reopen on May 3rd, and children will attend in groups of 15. Each group will attend for half of each week to limit the spread of the virus, and the same will go for students in 1st through 3rd grades, with school officials staggering recesses to keep playgrounds from overcrowding. Now, students in 4th grade through high school will continue remote learning programs. The government has already allowed special education students to return to class under similar directives, and around 25,000 pupils have already gone back to school. Health officials are cautioning against reopening schools too early, stressing concerns that children may infect one another widely and put their parents and their grandparents at risk. Now, this is also some big news. Israeli health minister and leader of the United Torah Judaism Party, Yaakov Litzman, is officially resigning from his post, of course, after heavy criticism across the political board. And now it looks like he's eyeing a position within an expanded housing portfolio. ILTV's Aaron Porras explains.
So, Litzman is stepping down, while both former and current health ministry officials say good riddance and that he should have left the ministry years ago. As the current and longtime head of the Israeli health ministry, Yaakov Litzman has been coming under increasingly harsh criticisms, especially now over his handling of the coronavirus pandemic, where he himself had been infected while ignoring his own ministry's restrictions. Well, blue and white officials are now welcoming the news and are demanding that his replacement be a clinician and not a politician at all. Another criticism against Litzman, however, is that as health minister, he primarily focused on serving his own ultra-Orthodox community and not the Israeli public at large. And such fears are now following him over to the housing ministry, where he wants to be appointed. According to Israeli news reports, Litzman is apparently changing ministries at the instructions of his rabbi, Yaakov Aryeh Alter, because apparently, as head of the housing ministry, he can again be more helpful to the Haredi needs, while avoiding becoming the scapegoat for the fallout from the pandemic.
Well, in related news, the political system in Israel is beginning to return to normal with the formation of a unity government. And the list of government ministers is starting to fill up, but thousands of Israelis are taking to the streets to protest in the second such black flag protest in a week. Israelis are demonstrating against Prime Minister Netanyahu and what they claim is his erosion of the democracy. Well, joining us now with more is Davidi Hermelian, the president of the International Center for Public Diplomacy in Israel. So before we get to the protest, let's start with ministry appointments. Like we said before, Health Minister Yaakov Litzman has decided to end his term and switch to the Housing and Construction Ministry. His rabbi apparently says that control of the Housing Ministry would better serve the Haredi community, and that dropping health would prevent Litzman from being scapegoated over the virus. What would Litzman's policies look like, in your opinion?
Well, I want to believe that as he was, according to my point of view, excellent Minister of Health, and he took care for the entire public of Israel. I'm pretty sure that he will be very talented and very fruitful Minister of Housing. And I do believe that he will see the interests of the entire public also in this ministry. As figure, he's very talented figure, right? He's not like, he's not dressed like me or like the most, the majority in Israel. But by talents, he's very talented, and I'm sure that he will do a great job also there.
All right, well, let's turn to the protests where demonstrators are saying that there's a conflict of interest in this new coalition government, a system which allows Netanyahu to form a government while under criminal indictment. Is there any other evidence to support what the protesters are saying, especially with the judicial appointments?
No, I don't really think that they have a case, but it doesn't mean that I really like this new legislation, because I just watched, before our conversation, I just watched the discussions in Knesset, and the changes in the basic law of the government are too far, if you would ask me. And some from the left wing would say that all these changes are coming to, to keep the interest of one person, Prime Minister Netanyahu. But to be honest, they are coming to protect the interests of Mr. Gantz, because he will be the so-called alternative Prime Minister. I do think that it could be the same coalition could be without this hunger for ministries and for rotation. And even if we would choose, the leaders would choose to maintain rotation between them, they could just agree about that without these laws. And Mr. Gantz should take the risk without changing the constitutional, parameters of Israel.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us with this information. All right. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I've been pretty worried about when I'm going to be able to visit my family that lives abroad, or even just when I'm going to be able to go on vacation. And that's why I'm very excited to share this good news. It looks like the U.S. airline Delta and the budget carrier Wizz Air are planning to resume flights to Israel early next month. And it seems that global travel as a whole will start ramping back up. Delta Airlines says it's booking flights between New York and Tel Aviv starting on May 10th. And on May 3rd, the Hungarian airline Wizz Air will be resuming service between Tel Aviv and London as a part of a larger plan to begin flying across the continent. Initially, flights will run 3 times a week. A Vienna-Tel Aviv route is also going to hit the air on May 17th. And international air travel across the world has gone down by a whopping 80%. The International Air Transport Association says that the sector will lose an estimated $300 billion as a result of the coronavirus crisis. Here in Israel, air travel has almost completely shut down, with just a handful of weekly flights, including a daily route to Newark, New Jersey by United Airlines. And Ben Gurion Airport says they've gone from dealing with about 5,000 passengers an hour to 5,000 passengers a month. But if you're planning on coming to Israel, keep this in mind. Foreign tourists are still banned entry into the country. Plus, all Israeli citizens and residents arriving in Israel from overseas are required to be housed in a state-run quarantine hotel upon entry for at least 14 days. So these days, the need to disinfect or sterilize every surface might feel like an obsession, but let's face it, it's pretty tough to use all those expensive store-bought cleaners or bleach and other harsh chemicals. Thankfully, though, a new solution is on its way from here in Israel, and ILTV's Nittany Manson has the details.
An incredible new disinfectant is now being produced in Israeli labs, and it'll forever change the way we clean our world. And while you may think I'm being melodramatic, believe me, it's true. This novel cleaner will be cheaper, easier to produce, and safe for the environment. And it's still every bit as good, if not better, at killing bacteria as other products. In fact, in recent tests, it's been shown to be effective against the coronavirus too. Developed by chemists at Bar Ilan University in Ramat Gan, this patented disinfectant mixes tap water with nanometer-shaped electrodes, creating an effective compound that works against bacteria, viruses, and spores. And because it's based on water, it's safe to touch skin. It does not contaminate the groundwater, and it can be used in more applications, such as sterilizing beds, bathrooms, and electronic devices. It can even be sprayed on fresh food to remove pesticides. But maybe best of all is its compact design. Through a partnership with Israeli startup Aqua Solutions, a commercial and portable version of the disinfectant is in development, and researchers explain that when it's finished, all you'll have to do is take out the compact spray bottle device, fill it with the nearest tap water, and spray.
All right, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be partly cloudy and cool with a low 53 or 12 degrees Celsius. And then tomorrow you can expect more clear to partly cloudy skies, but a warm high of about 76 Fahrenheit or 24 degrees Celsius. And now before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel. All right, so that's amazing. What you're seeing right now is a young boy's brother returning from duty in the IDF. He was stuck on base because of the coronavirus, and he finally came home and surprised his little brother. And I think a lot of us are wishing that we could see all of the family members that we are currently socially distancing from, so very heartwarming. All right, that is it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.52 shekels to the American dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube and Roku TV pages. I'm Natasha Kirchak, and thanks for watching.